Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. It's been 7 days since I last produced a video for yourselves, and in what has felt like an age, I hope you have had a wonderful week. In the meantime, today I have for you everything you need to know for Game Week 13, including captaincy, which is very difficult considering we have 4 serious contenders. We've got Arsenal assets, we've got Jackson versus Isak, and so much more. Like I said, everything you need to know is covered. We've also got my wildcard team on screen, which I showed in the video I previously made. Now, there have been a few iterations to it. However, for in-depth player insights, I would strongly recommend you go and watch it if you haven't, especially when it comes to the likes of why I've chosen Jackson and Isak and why they're so far ahead of some of the other forward assets, which are popular in my opinion, of course. Before we begin, 47% of you who watched regularly last month haven't subscribed to the channel. If you think you could be one of those people, if you could just take a moment to check and press the button, should you be one of them, I would be greatly, greatly appreciative. We are hoping to hit 5,000 subscribers by the end of the month, which would be a fantastic achievement. However, nothing else needs to be said, so let's get into the video. I have 4 prime contenders for the captaincy armband this week: Mohamed Salah, Cole Palmer, Bruno Fernandes, and Erling Haaland, who features on the next slide for reasons you shall see. In this type of week, I think there are 2 things to do when the captaincy is so close. One, you need to get a little bit lucky to be successful, and I don't think anyone can deny that, because you need someone who's got very similar prospects to perform significantly worse than the asset you choose to captain. So there's that. The other thing, though, is when it comes to the decision-making process, I think you need to find something from the football side of things to give you somewhat of an edge, regardless of what the statistics say. And when I say statistic, I mean mainly what the models are outputting. And for me, I think I've found one, albeit in a slightly different way, if you are willing to accept that type of risk. Okay, let's start with Mohamed Salah. Southampton have transitioned into a formation which is a 5 at the back, which is not something I was anticipating. The game against Wolves is a really, really, really good game to show their evolution and what they're trying to do. Why? Firstly, look at the chances that Wolves created. First of all, there really weren't that many. Second of all, they were largely due to high turnovers, which we're going to touch on, and pretty much none of them were through good small space ability in and around the block, or just shifting Southampton's block and being able to create pocket of space from which to penetrate, or just general traditional creative mechanisms. Rather, all of the chances they pretty much created were a resultant of high turnovers when Southampton were insistent of playing out of the back, and a couple of brilliant bits of play by Cunha, specifically leveraging his ball carrying, his ball striking, and level of physicality in and around that midfield area. Okay, so that's that. We've established that, right? Even against Everton, they didn't concede too many chances from what I would call settled possession. Against Liverpool, I expect them to take a very similar approach to the one they do in pretty much every game. 5-4-1, like now that they're playing the system, they will play out the back, but they will certainly sit deep in a low block. I wouldn't say Liverpool have the best creative mechanisms in the world, or creative weapons, to break down a low block. I think one of their best mechanisms to do that is Salah in a more creative role when he's going to be playing slightly wider in this. And if you actually look at the goals Mohamed Salah scored, none of them, not a single one, game week 1 aside, have come against settled blocks from good small space actions from some of the other players. Now, Curtis Jones has been very impressive, but that's not really his game either. I think you probably prefer him a bit more in the transition. His body is very football strong, and that's one reason why. Even McAllister, who is described as a more technical player, he's always a little bit deeper, and he won't be finding himself in between the lines as much. So in settled possession, I wouldn't be overly surprised if we see Salah have a somewhat more difficult game than most people envisage. Now, Liverpool, obviously, a very competent press. I think they could be a bit more aggressive with their 4-2-4 press, and if they are to do so, they could definitely profit from Southampton's insistence on building up from the back, right? But I feel like that is very game by game. Some days they're just not going to lose the ball when they're playing out from the back, and some days they just will, right? So there's that side of things. There's obviously the transitional element in the game as a whole. However, I don't think Southampton will offer you too much of that. And then the other thing is, and the most important, I guess, overarching thing, is just Salah's general quality and Liverpool's general quality, the disparity between the two sides and the disparity between Salah and pretty much anyone he's going to come up against. So I think we always have that established. But from the perspective that where Salah's scored most of his goals from, being isolated situations and transitional moments and a couple penalties, I don't think he'll get too many of those against Southampton. I also think Southampton are a bit better than people give them credit for. I think they're well organised. I think they've got an actual good set of defenders. I like Harwood Bellis, obviously scored on his England debut, good for him. And just in general, for the personnel, we spoke about this before, right? Talent-wise in the squad, they're pretty solid. So you've got the overarching thing of Salah and Liverpool's quality, but then the counter argument is everything that I've just posed. And therefore, I do not think it's anywhere close to being a slam dunk when you have options that are so brilliant in their own rights. And we're going to discuss them now, and we'll circle back to Salah. But that's essentially my counter argument as to why I'm potentially considering straying away from it. However, I want to reiterate again, yes, we have the quality of Salah and we have the quality of Liverpool, and you can't take away from that, right? But I think, like I said, in these type of weeks, we need to find something from a footballing standpoint that essentially allows us to have a bit of a gap. Okay, now let's move to Cole Palmer. I think Leicester will undoubtedly operate in some form of a low block, but for Palmer himself, I think that's probably a good thing. Why? Well, he has a wide variety of weapons in which to generate returns from. One, which is used repeatedly, is these brilliant passes into the runners like Neto and Jackson to generate returns like that. Okay, he'll have the opportunity to do that when Chelsea catch Leicester in transition, and they will at times. But in general, in settled possession, when Leicester's block is deep, I think he'll still find himself between the lines and receiving the ball there, because Chelsea's build-up, in terms of the technicians we have, is good. I like it. I think it's good enough. I also think that he's so good in those small spaces in between the lines that he'll be able to manufacture something himself. Anyway, so I don't really have too much of a worry that he himself is coming up against a slightly deeper block. I think I do for Jackson, potentially, if Leicester can really get into the game and establish themselves and set up in a way which becomes very difficult to break down, similarly to like we do with Haaland when he has those type of games. But for someone like Cole Palmer playing in the 10, who isn't, we haven't had too many options playing this number 10 role, which is why I don't think we've spoken about it too much. I think it's fine. I don't think he's injured. I think he'll be fine. I think like that was just a nice 2-week rest period to, let the body recover. And I think he should be good to go. So for me personally, given what I can expect him to have between the lines, and given there will be transitional opportunities, not plenty, but they'll be there, and what I saw from Bruno against Leicester as well, in a similar-ish type of role, in a similar-ish type of player, I think he should do pretty well. And then you've obviously got the other thing that Chelsea have definitely shown themselves to be, and himself in particular have shown themselves to be somewhat of a flat track bully for a variety of reasons. So I think that that's something to hold. The negatives are that Leicester at home, they're not that easy to beat. Okay, they've scored against everyone they've played apart from Man United, and there was no Jamie Vardy present. So I think they'll definitely apply some pressure on Chelsea going the other way. And if they can get ahead early, I wouldn't be surprised if they make themselves very, very difficult to beat. So I think early instances in that game will have a huge bearing on what unfolds. The other thing is it's also a 12:30 kickoff, so there's a more balanced argument. Bruno is probably the one that isn't being discussed too much, I can imagine, in this category. I imagine it's mainly Haaland, Salah, Palmer, but I actually quite like it. There are some positives and negatives. We'll discuss the negatives first. One, there was a report on Twitter, X, that Mason Mount could be in line for a start. And if he is, does he play him and Bruno together with Rashford as the runner as the 9? Maybe. But I think that maybe blocks Bruno in somewhat. Do I think he plays in the pivot? No, but I know that, or I've read that Amorim isn't too happy with the technical quality within that pivot. So maybe he drops him a little bit deeper against a side like Ipswich where he thinks he's going to have more of the ball. The other thing is, what's United's patterns of play going to be like? How suited will Bruno be to this specific system? Well, we don't know because we've literally never seen it. Obviously, we can make estimations and assumptions, but I'm not sure how it's going to unfold. So we've got those uncertainties and unknowns there, etc., right? Given you've got a new manager in an entirely different system, so the way that the players are going to interact will be completely different. Okay, so there's that. The positives, however, is that one, he's in brilliant form and he looks sharp again. Two, as an asset and as a player, he's a very high ceiling asset because he's got so many weapons in his arsenal, similar to the likes of Cole Palmer. The other thing is when I was watching Ipswich versus Spurs back, like in terms of just doing some analysis, one thing I noticed with their blockers, even if they're well set, they manage to concede so many chances because their second line of the press isn't super physical. And in general, I don't think it does what it should in terms of covering space or blocking passing lanes. And I think as a result, you'll be able to create quite a bit against them. And I've seen teams do that. They have quality, right? Like Amari Hutchinson's ball carrying is something I really like. Liam Delap up top is something great. Leave Davis down that flank in terms of his attacking quality is again very good. And I think McKenna's fairly flexible as well, compared to maybe some of the other promoted managers we've had. So I see positives attached to just Ipswich and what they can do in terms of a performance. However, I think United should have enough of them, especially Bruno operating in those central spaces. Is if Ipswich's second line is to offer him probably more space than others would, and they are able to be a bit more fluid United, there is just a bit more space on offer. I think it could certainly hurt them. So I'm actually somewhat bullish on it, on the assumption you're okay with handling the unknown, such as expected minutes, such as exact positioning. Those two things in particular. Now, you are undoubtedly seeking a conclusion to what I've just discussed in terms of captaincy and a form of ranking, at least. And I will definitely give you one. However, first, we must discuss Erling Haaland. Seldom is the case that we have people advocating for selling a player while simultaneously others advocating for him getting the armband. However, in a realm of infinite possibilities, here we are. So let's discuss it. I would only say he's a sell this week if the conviction you have behind a Salah or Palmer captaincy is extremely strong. Because Spurs are, of course, without Mickey van der Ven and Christian Romero, likely, right? It's likely that they're out with them. And I know that Kulusevski had an issue tonight when playing with Sweden. That would be huge. You may think, oh, Kulusevski's an attacking player, so maybe Spurs are able to sustain less pressure. No. One, Kulusevski always has a brilliant game against Manchester. But my main reasons, plural, are more so from a football standpoint. The fact that his ball retention in the middle against a side like City, very useful. His work rate and general level of physicality against a side like City is very useful. And then also, just the fact that you have a bit more attacking quality on the ball allows you some form of a pressure release because you won't have to do as much defending. And in general, when you go up the pitch, you'll have a little bit more confidence. All of these things factor in a little bit, right? I'm talking about the mental side of it. So not having him would also be a pretty big deal. It would be slightly more okay, considering the talent in this squad, if Andrew was to go there with a different approach to what they normally do. However, we all know that that's not happening. So the question becomes, can City sort their chance creation issues out to a fairly decent extent, and will Spurs still give them plenty of transitions in the game? If Spurs are to give them plenty of transitions in the game in which to capitalize from, Haaland is a brilliant, brilliant option. And especially now that De Bruyne is back and he's had the international break off after returning for Brighton, having him is a completely different dynamic to what we've seen. Okay, we still don't have Rodri. Okay, that's still a big issue. But having De Bruyne back against a weakened Spurs side with the style of football they play, that's a big plus. So I actually think he's a very, very good option. Going back to Salah and Palmer, people are looking to sell him for potentially one or two of them to facilitate that. What I would say is this is probably not the best week to sell Haaland. I actually think you can very justifiably captain him if Mickey van der Ven and Christian Romero are out. I would also say that Salah's run after Southampton for the next three, City, Newcastle away, Everton away, isn't actually that good. So not having him probably isn't the end of the world. Are you going to captain him in 13? No. If you aren't to captain him this week either, you're not really missing out on much, especially if you prefer both Haaland and Palmer to him. In 14 away, when he's at Newcastle, you'll almost definitely captain Cole Palmer given the fixture set. And then 15 is a little bit more open to interpretation, but I'm not sure you'd be captaining him away at Everton. So going without him probably isn't the end of the world. And for those reasons, not only would I not be selling Haaland, but I would have him above him in my captaincy rankings because of what I discussed earlier. I certainly think that Haaland's stealing is still present. And this is coming from a guy that is selling Haaland this week because I can't really justify keeping him on a wild card. Because for me, I wouldn't say he's the captain option I would like to choose this week. I think it's very, 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 very close between him and Cole Palmer. I probably have Palmer 1% ahead if you were looking for a set of rankings. So I would go Palmer, Haaland, and I'm slightly in the mood to say Bruno over Salah. That's open to interpretation. Regardless, I think between them, it's somewhat close. I'm just hanging on to the fact that, one, I'm expecting a somewhat decent performance from Southampton, better than most people probably think they're going to give. And the other thing is, he's been performing at such a exceptional level, right? And he's been almost generating returns for himself. He has so many times. And I just wonder, is that slightly unsustainable with what he's being fed? And you know what? Given a guy of his quality, I think he can keep going. But I'm fine to take like a 1 week punt against that in the form of captaincy when Palmer exists with such a high ceiling. And obviously, those of you who have Haaland, I think that is justifiable to do as well. So that's my opinion on Haaland there and just the general captaincy roundup. Cunha and Joao Pedro. Okay, Cunha is a guy I've been raving about for so long. He is a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant footballer. Okay, however, one, he's actually not that cheap anymore. He's like, depending on when you bought him, 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", maybe pushing 6'9". Okay, in 2 of the next 3, they have Fulham away, Everton away. 2 sides that it is difficult to go to and create a lot of chances for different reasons. I think Fulham impose their physicality so well, and they're very well coached, and they have a lot of talent in their squad. Everton, I wouldn't say they have as much talent, nor do they impose themselves physically as well, but they've got a brilliant defensive coach, and they will be a very robust block to break down. Okay. Wolves undoubtedly have chance creation issues. They don't have a creative in this side. There's a huge reliance on transitions and their high press and Cunha's ball carrying and just Cunha in general to create something. And I don't think over a sustained period that's going to be enough with the level of the Premier League. Honestly, I think they're in a bit more trouble than most people think, in my opinion, right? So I'm fine to go without him when we look at the opportunity cost through the options you would have to forego as a result. Bournemouth in the middle, I think, is probably the best picture for them because Bournemouth at least engage in a transitional game, which is where Wolves can profit. However, I think they just do it better than Wolves, and Wolves will have some struggles as a result. So I'm not as high on Cunha, even though I know that he has pretty much all the fundamentals nailed down and he is a top player. I think his team can essentially hold him back from being successful. The counter argument will be, well, he's doing so well so far, and I would agree, but I don't think when the opportunity cost exists of Jackson, Isak, and Joao Pedro, I can justify it. In isolation, yeah, sure, it's not that bad. And like I said, I've only spoken about weeks 13, 14, 15. From 16, I like it. I like it a lot more. But in the short term, I think I would be missing some upside should I not go anywhere else. So for those on a wild card or those looking to transfer in, maybe one of Cunha or someone else, that's my 2 pence on basically why I think you can wait 3 weeks at least. For me, Joao Pedro, good to go. I think Hertzler really likes him. The fact that he talks about his quality in such a kind way, to praise it one way, and the fact that he talks about his leadership qualities as well, reflecting how he sees him in terms of his personality, I think that's great. In terms of the fact that he's got so much responsibility in the squad, the fact that the manager really likes him, the fact that he doesn't just like him, he appreciates both his internal qualities and external qualities in terms of his footballing sense. For me, that just suggests that expected minutes wise, he should actually be okay. Yeah, sure, he's coming back from injury, but it probably wasn't the most serious injury in the world. And it seems like they've done a really good job with reintegrating him at the right time and building him up to speed. He's got penalties. He's got a brilliant fixture on, and he's such a brilliant enabler. 5'4" is so cheap. And for those reasons, I'm very, very, very happy to have Joao Pedro. I think he works fantastically well with all of Rodgers, Semenyo, and ESR in a rotation. And with that in mind, specifically his price, I think it's very difficult to forego him if you are on a wildcard or just generally to facilitate something. We now move on to Chris Wood, who I think is a really, really, really interesting one. Okay, firstly, he has been in magnificent form. Forest are, as a whole, playing very well. And it is not like over the course of the next 7 games, he's going to accumulate 0 chances. And there is, of course, Ipswich at home in game week 13. I've got the game weeks wrong, I feel like, in this video a few times, so excuse me for that, right? So there's that. But my counter argument on why you should sell him, I actually think is fairly precise and quite logical. There is not a single goal he has scored from a direct, quick, long distance transition. And the reason I put long distance in there is for the following reasons. Look at the fixtures he has, and look at the fixture he has had, which is somewhat similar to that, being Liverpool. Forest set up in a deep, well-structured, aggressive, low block. And their outs were long balls into it, of which he didn't win too many. He did all right. But those aren't the type of situations where he's going to be generating a goal-scoring opportunity from. He's the one looking to win flick on, win a header, and just help get his team up the pitch into some form of settled possession. Okay? But aside from that, it's really just really quick, long-distance transitions. And who are going to be the beneficiaries of those in terms of output? Elanga, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Morgan Gibbs-White, the guys who arrive and carry very well and are going to get them up the pitch. With Wood not being a channel runner, with him not really having that explosive sense of pace in behind in which to exploit oppositions in that transition, he is not going to be in the positions at the volume you'd like him, at the frequency you'd like him, in that type of game state. Okay. And all you have to do is look at the goals he scored. He has not scored a single one of these. And that's why I pointed it out. Okay. Pretty much all of them are in situations where the opposition's defense is more settled, or Forest are more settled and have some form of dominance and territorial dominance up the pitch. And he's in a situation where to generate the goal, it's just a few moves, right, in a small space. Like a quick finish, a quick swing of the leg, a header, a little movement across the front post, etc., etc. But it's not Forest have the ball on the edge of their own box, Alanga's taken the ball, he's carried, and Woods arrived after a 50, 60-yard sprint, right? And that's just very unlikely to happen with him and the type of player he is. Which is not to say it's a bad thing, it's just not the type of player he is. Arsenal, Manchester City, Manchester United, Aston Villa, and Spurs. 5 out of the next 7. All of whom I expect Forest to go deep, right? Almost definitely expect them to go deep. And they're out in terms of scoring goals, will be to score goals in this manner. And that's not really Chris Wood's game. So considering that, I think this is a really good time to get off. I expect him to go down in price sometime soon if he sees a few blanks, and therefore he'll go down quite quickly. I think you'll be missing out on value from the likes of Jackson and Isak. I think the ceilings in the immediate term are much higher. And therefore, for me, you've had a brilliant run with him. He's a very good striker in his own right. He'll be back, but for now, with these fixtures, and for the reason that we've just discussed, I think it's best to relinquish him. The counter argument will be, can we keep him for Game Week 13 and just sell him after that? And I think you absolutely can. Ipswich at home is a good fixture, undoubtedly. I would say Ipswich have within them the ability to go through a significant period of the game playing very well. They've showcased that against mainly Aston Villa and Leicester at home, and obviously this is away for them, so that's something to factor. So look, there's a lot of upside attached to Chris Wood in Game Week 13. I do think it's okay to move him on. I think it's absolutely fine to move him on beforehand to capture the immediate upside in Game Week 12 of Jackson and Isak, and then kind of just hope that like in Game Week 13 it stays somewhat neutral. Maybe you gain some value as a result of the moves, and essentially take things from there. Moving on, one of the most popular questions we've had is Jackson versus Isak. And I'm not going to tell you that one is significantly better than the other. If you watched my wildcard video, you would have seen that I have Jackson in tier 1.5 and Isak in tier 2. And I think it is really that close between them that I wasn't even willing to put Jackson in the whole tier above. There are a lot of good things going for Isak at the moment. One, and the main thing being the fundamentals he provides on top of the quality he has, and the fact that it's the Christmas period. So if you ever wanted quality and fundamentals as a combination, you would want it in this period because there's more scope for that to generate more value for yourselves. I would say that his fixtures in 13 to 15, whilst I'll think they'll be fine, are somewhat open to interpretation. A Palace back 5 away at Selhurst Park can potentially always cause you problems. Okay, fine. The pivot really hasn't helped them so far, but if they have a good game, it's not the easiest game in the world. You've got Liverpool in Game Week 14. Not one of the easiest sides at all. Probably been the best defense in the league so far. Maybe you can argue about them and Arsenal, but this season they've undoubtedly been a very, very good defense. And then away at Brentford. Brentford have showcased at times making themselves tough to beat, albeit I do expect Thomas Frank to engage in a game model and put one out, which certainly allows him to thrive as well. But they have the capacity to make it tough, especially when you consider the physicality of their centre-back. So I think 13 to 15, if not 13 to 14, is somewhat open to interpretation, which probably knocks them down a peg. The other thing is, whilst Newcastle are getting better, and they are undoubtedly getting better in terms of their attacking patterns, I wouldn't say they're anywhere near as good or as well grooved as Chelsea's at the moment. Then you consider the fact that Jackson's fixtures from a stylistic standpoint are fantastic. Even Villa is a really good fixture for him. I've spoken on this channel so much about how if you have a physical striker who's good at running behind and is strong against Aston Villa centre-back, you're in business. It doesn't matter who you are, you're in business. And then obviously you've got Southampton and Leicester surrounding that. You've got Spurs, which is a lovely fixture for him. You've got Brentford, which is, like we spoke with Isak, could also be a very good fixture for him. So there's that. The thing with Isak is he's obviously on the up because Newcastle's attacking dynamics are improving whilst not at the same level as Chelsea's. Even though like Gordon on the right isn't my preference, at least Howe established something very solid with a very fluid Joe Linton and Joe Willock operating as left wing, and then you've got Hall advancing and helping in those pockets as well, right? So I think he's really improved the dynamics, and he's shown himself to be able to do that. So you expect Newcastle to get better. But with the price difference and with the immediate upside I see to Jackson, specifically in like 13, 14, for me, I would go there. I think it's super close though, and I've tossed internally a little bit and almost changed my mind internally at times. And like I said, there's so little in it. Personally, I would go Jackson, but I don't think anyone can fault you, least of all myself, if you go Isak, because I do genuinely think it is so close. I just wanted to present to you what I thought were at least close to fact. I thought, given the variety of questions on Arsenal assets, it's better just to do a whole section on them. And we're going to start with the defense. Okay, sure, Gabriel has returned you pretty much nothing over the last 6 weeks, ever since pretty much everyone brought him in after or for game week 6 and when he wildcarded. However, I would not let that determine how you view him now. The fixtures from a defensive standpoint are something that I really do like, and I think Arsenal are certainly able to generate clean sheets from them, especially when you consider now that Odegaard's back in the side. I actually expect them to be better off the ball because I think he helps so much in terms of what Arsenal offer in their press, that he allows them to press high. He's also so intelligent, understands the system so well in terms of blocking passing lanes and cutting angles and the nuances and the intricacies that maybe go missed sometimes to most people in terms of the press. I think that's really useful. I also think that in general, he works very hard as well. That's all super useful in terms of off the ball. Also, you've got Rice probably playing that left 8. You've got Partey at the base, and then you've got like a Timber and a Calafiori, who, from a fullback perspective, in terms of what you're getting on and off the ball, is huge. So I think Arsenal will be able to maintain a lot of, and then you've got Odegaard in the middle as well. You've got Arsenal now able to maintain dominance in the game a lot better. A huge amount of physicality in the side, making them significantly more difficult to hurt on transition. And in general, you've got the dueling capacity needed within the side to function at fairly elite level. Okay, so there's that. Like I said, the fixtures are also good. From a set piece standpoint, he still poses, Gabriel in particular, the biggest box threat in the league. What I would say is, personally, one thing I've noticed is that since Mourinho's come into the side, it's taken away from him somewhat. I felt like the set pieces used to be so geared towards Gabriel, but since Mourinho's come in the side, and the fact that he's just a threat from them, like we saw against Liverpool and Newcastle to an extent, he's going to essentially have the routine shifted, whereby the threat is spread now across like the whole unit, but specifically Gabriel and Marina. And I don't like that for Gabriel. Whilst I don't think that takes away from the whole thing, of course he's still a huge threat and arguably the biggest, I do think that it's worse than when we first started off prior to game week 1. So there's that. But apart from that, I think it's still very solid, and you expect an upturn in Arsenal's defensive form. The other thing you have to consider is, would they have kept a clean sheet against Brighton had they not got a red card? You know what? Probably. Would they have played better against City had they not got a red card? Yeah, probably. And there's another game as well, which I'm forgetting. Oh, Bournemouth as well. Could he have kept a clean sheet there if Saliba didn't get sent off? Yeah, that's a huge deal. So there's all of those things which could have made him look better. Now, the other thing that people are speaking about when it comes to Arsenal and the defensive assets is doubling up. And you know what? In isolation, I love the idea, right? However, we don't play a game where you can think of things solely in isolation. From a relative standpoint, it's a little bit more difficult for me to justify. I've expressed my views on Raya. Whilst I think in isolation, a very good keeper to own, can I justify him when every single year it's the 4.5 keeper that shines? And again, this year, Sells, Sanchez, and Onana, obviously who started at 5, but still cheaper than Raya, when he's shining, can I justify Raya? I think not. Saliba, again, I would like to own. I expect him to get some form of an attacking return from a set piece, at least throughout this run, or at some point in the season, especially given the fixture run's good. You could haul, but at 6 million, when there's so many on offer, like 4.4, or even Ran and Digne at 4.7, can I justify him? I don't think so in a relative sense. So for me, I would stick to just Gabriel, because I think you would like a bit of cover, especially with Gabriel's attacking upside. And whilst I like the Arsenal double defense in isolation, I don't think it's suitable or reality, given the strategic sense of and landscape of the game at the moment. Continuing with that trend, Kai Havertz. Now, Kai Havertz is going to provide you a number 9 for the second best team in the league, arguably. You can debate that in the comments should you wish. Who will play every minute of every game and has the capacity to exploit sides when they have space in behind, as in general, a huge physical presence, and will undoubtedly accumulate chances, cause sides problems, and has a very good home record. So we've got all of that. However, there are a few things which come into question with him. One, are Arsenal's attacking dynamics going to revert to what they were maybe against like Wolves in the first game of the season, or arguably Brighton in that first half of an early game in the season, where I thought they were much better and he was being serviced a lot better? If they are, okay, he's a much better asset. But we've only seen him haul once, and that was in game week 1. And I do worry about his ceiling due to, 1, the attacking dynamics we just spoke about, and 2, his own finishing. Even if I put him in those positions, I'm more confident in some of the other strikers, like Isak, to put the ball away. And whilst I don't think he's a bad finisher, I do think he's in need of a hot streak there. to essentially justify his selection. So that's one and two question marks. And the third one is the opportunity. As I just expressed, I really like Jack. I really like Isak. And he's blocking them. He's expensive at 8 now, I believe it is, not 8-1. So with that in mind, would I go there? For me personally, not. Unless I see a huge upturn in either his finishing or Arsenal's attacking dynamics, I'm happy to go elsewhere with slightly more proven assets in like recent weeks, when the fixtures are slightly better for them as well. I don't think Havertz are bad. I think they could actually be quite decent for him in particular, but I would like to see a little bit more from Arsenal and himself in terms of finishing. Okay, Saka, I'm not going to say this is entirely logical because I am selecting him somewhat for a gut feel, and I am definitely a feel player, more so than the average, I would say. Whether that's good or bad, you can decide. So that's one reason why I'd like him. Obviously, in the Christmas period, we've talked about fundamentals. He has all of them, right? Probably not 90 minutes anymore. Probably like what average 80, 75-ish to 80 over the Christmas period. But with his quality, that's absolutely fine. Set pieces for the best set piece team in the country, and penalties. Okay. Then he's got a variety of tools in which to generate attacking returns. He's got left in swinging crosses from a deeper pocket on the right side, go to the bar line and put crosses across. He can also reach the bar line as well. He doesn't need to put there because he can go both ways. Ball striking at a variety of angles. You want to put him in the box, small spaces, etc., etc. Like creatively, more orientated to goal scoring. He's got so much in his arsenal, right? He's got a variety of finishes, etc., etc., etc. And I think over a medium-term period, when you've got a guy who's probably fit now, with the set of fixtures that he does, they're not too challenging. They're not elite, but they're not too challenging. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially if you're going to go Haalandless, because where else are you going to allocate the money in a more efficient manner, right? So for me, Bukayo Saka is someone you would like to bring in sooner rather than later. I've got my eye on him for a Game Week 13 captaincy. Like I said, the spider senses are just tingling a little bit, and there definitely is that gut feel there. But if you are on board with me with that and you like take that into consideration and value that, for those reasons, aside from just the footballing ones which I discussed, I like Bukayo Saka, and I've spoken about his fixtures. For him individually, I actually think they're okay, if not pretty good. Another highly requested topic was Semenyo versus Rodgers versus Emil Smith-Rowe. We'll start with the latter. I would say his fixtures, or his good fixtures, span over the shortest length, especially in comparison to Semenyo and Rodgers to an extent where they span over the longer term. We obviously want to build a side and have players which allow us to have the best depth. And with Arsenal and Liverpool 15 and 16, I'm not sure he really fits that category. The other thing is, even Spurs away is certainly open to interpretation, as I think they've been better defensively this year. And Brighton have a little bit more in them, I think, than I maybe originally gave them credit for. I still think it's a decent fixture from an attacking standpoint, but I just give them a bit more credit than I did previously. I think the Joao Pedro coming back just helps him off the ball, and a variety of other things, which probably isn't so important for this particular section. Okay. I also think that in terms of his final actions, Smith-Rowe is the most refined, which serves as a counter argument to excluding him. And if you wanted someone to generate a certain level of output, it probably would be him out of the three if he's going to be put in the positions. I would say that as a counter argument to that, one of his redeeming qualities as an asset is the fixture in 17 with Southampton at home. But I do think against Southampton's 5-4-1, he could struggle maybe a little bit. And again, going back to the Christmas period, does he start every single game? I wouldn't be surprised if he was benched for one, whereas I can't see that really happening for Semenyo. And even Rodgers, I'd be somewhat surprised. I feel like this guy can just play pretty much every game. Okay, so for me, especially when he's more expensive than the other two, I think we narrow it down to Semenyo versus Rodgers. I think if budget really isn't an issue for you, the team value is exceptional, I'm actually slightly more inclined to go for Semenyo here, who I won't own. I'll own Rodgers due to budget constraints, I'm 99% sure. But I think I'm slightly inclined to go with Semenyo. I think the fixture run he has is better. And that's probably the main thing. Honestly, that's the main thing. I just think that like Rodgers isn't as good. And when there's so little between them, okay, fine, there's the price difference. I think I just trust Semenyo with the fixtures a little bit more. I think Rodgers, I'd like to see a bit more ruthlessness in front of goal, which again, he missed a big chance against Liverpool. And whilst Semenyo can be wasteful at times, I wouldn't say he is so to the same extent. So for me, primarily for the goal threat and not much more, I would go Semenyo, who's the best goalkeeper. And my view on this has shifted. Initially, it was Verbruggen, but as you can imagine, it's one of the other two now. I think Konate is really good, and that's in his own right, and that's why he's top of the charts for the goalkeepers. However, given he's more expensive, significantly more expensive when you look at the category in relative terms, I think there's quite a bit of risk attached there, especially when you consider you don't know how they're going to play under Amarin. You expect the three at the back to shore them up defensively, but the fixture run after the next two isn't great. Like, even Ipswich definitely have a goal in them. Everton at home is good, but then it's like Arsenal away, Forest at home, which is and City away, and just after that, the run isn't great for an extended period. Maybe they have a couple games here or there, but Bournemouth and Wolves aren't too easy either. So for those reasons, I think you can go past him. And really, it's Sanchez versus Verbruggen for the fixture set. For me, though, I actually think Chelsea's fixtures, one, not only do they span a longer time, the good fixtures, but I actually think their good fixtures compared to Brighton's good fixtures are better when you just look at them. So for me, with that, plus the defensive quality of like Chelsea, just in terms of personnel as opposed to system, and even the system you could argue is probably a little bit better for clean sheets, I'm going to go Sanchez. It's the fixture quality that's mainly put me that side. When I looked at it in a bit more depth and I thought about it, I did see some significant disparity between them, even though they appear fairly green on the FDR. And for those reasons, I'm now willing, as you'll see in my wildcard iteration tomorrow in the team selection video, to actually go for Robert Sanchez. Finally, we're going to look at a few popular defenders and Trent himself. Konate, for me, I don't understand the hype. I've spoken about how Southampton have a decent amount of quality in this side, especially at home, and the way they play and the fact that they're so insistent on playing a high possession-based model. I think they'll make some chances against Liverpool, okay? And given Konate is 5'3", and given there are so many options at cheaper price points, I think it would be a more efficient allocation of funds to spend them elsewhere. And then going back to the fixtures, I don't even think they're that good. Okay, fine. Even if you think Southampton away is that good, you cannot argue that Manchester City at home is a good fixture for clean sheet. You cannot argue that Newcastle away is a good fixture for clean sheets. And then, okay, fine, Everton's not too bad, but Merseyside derby at Goodison is never going to be easy. And then when you combine that with the price, for me, I just don't get it. I'm progressively getting higher and higher on Aït-Nouri. Again, returning to the theory that we spoke about so much at the start or earlier parts of the season, that teams just aren't keeping many clean sheets given managers' shift in philosophies. The positions he's picking up are so attacking, and he's actually got the quality to deliver from those positions. For me, Aït-Nouri at 4.7 is a really, really, really good transfer to get in. Moving on to the Aston Villa boys. One of the assets who was blacklisted from most engaged managers' teams was Luca Digne, and he's actually on the opposite side of that now. There's a lot of bullishness towards himself as an asset, and understandably so, right? He's generated 3 assists this season. He had a fantastic game for France where I think he got 2 assists goal from a spectacular free kick, and the fixtures are pretty good. At 4.7, I'm all on board with it. So I think if you were to go there, great transfer. Concert at 4.4, I'm probably less bullish on because I think Villa definitely do have the ability to concede goals against pretty much everyone with the striker that has that physical aspect that we talked about. But at 4.4, the 3 fixtures in 12, 14, and 15 are good enough, in my opinion, to justify the selection. And of course, he definitely has some box threat. And if he's to play at right back, we've got some open play threat there. But if you can afford the extra 0.3 for Luca Digne, I think go there. Absolutely. Lewis Hall at 4.4, I really like. I think he's nailed now. He's just playing so well. Not to be, and I think he offers you so much going forward. Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall is a serious fallback combination, and I think as the season progresses and as Newcastle do better and better and better, people will start to see that and give them the credit that they deserve. So with the fixture set that he has and the fact that it extends for a while as well, I'm very happy to have him. Kirkes, I'm probably not as high on Bournemouth's defense for reasons discussed in prior videos, given the way they play. I just think they're going to get exploited at least probably once in a big way in a game. And whilst, yeah, for sure, he has that upside in terms of assists, I think when Dango Atara comes back on that flank, it'll be a lot to supply him and allow him to carry into those crossing-like positions. So for me, I'm not super high on Kirkes at the moment. Anderson, one reason people like him is because he's 4.3 as opposed to 4.4, so he saves a little bit more money, where money's pretty tight for everyone, I would say, at the moment. And I think it's decent. However, if you're going to go there, I think you have to have him as part of a rotation and just understand that he's absolutely playing second fiddle. And he's not great, but like for the weeks that he has decent fixtures, okay, he'll do. But he really is playing second fiddle in that rotation. Whereas something like a Joao Pedro and Semenyo / Rodgers, it's a lot closer to 50-50 at least. Trent has to go for me. I think even if he's fit this week, you'll get reduced minutes, which I guess from a clean sheet standpoint isn't too bad. But given I think Southampton could definitely score, you'd want him for the attacking returns. But he's not playing in a role where he's generating a lot of attacking returns. And this is something we spoke about a lot, and that has been spoken about a lot this season by many. So for me, when you're not getting the realistic ceiling He's so expensive. The fixtures after this aren't the best for the clean sheet prospects, and he acts as a brilliant facilitator through the cash that you raise to go and get the likes of Salah, Palmer, Saka, etc., Isak, Jackson. I think he just absolutely has to go. Is he going to haul? Yeah, probably. At some point, he almost definitely will haul. But I don't think you can play with such a scared mindset of potentially losing out those points in the future, because I think there's so many to gain elsewhere. And that is all she wrote. Did you miss it? We have my wildcard team on screen from the last wildcard video. As mentioned previously, you will see the new iteration in the team selection video tomorrow. In the meantime, please do comment if you have any questions. Please like the video. Last video that we put out was my second most viewed and my most liked videos. For that, I'm very grateful. Thank you. And if we could keep that trend going, that'd be magnificent. So like it if you enjoyed. Subscribe, of course, if you haven't, especially if you're one of the regular viewers who just hasn't clicked the button yet. Like I said, I shall see you tomorrow. Make sure to make it a great day. Goodbye.